Oliver Pichuan Luthier here, and today we're going to glue the bindings onto this tenor ukulele. It's a koa tenor ukulele, and the bindings are ebony and with little maple strips on either side. I made a previous video about how to make and bend the bindings, but today we're going to glue them on. They're oversized, as you can see, and these will be the ones for the other side. And what I've done is I've taken some maple, it's actually large leaf maple veneer, and I just dampened it and put it in the mold to overnight just to get it so that it's the approximate shape, and this will be the other side. But what we need to do is we need to cut them to the right length so that they mate properly here at the tail. On the top, it's not terribly critical that the top joint is perfect, because the neck and the fretboard will come in and they'll cover that joint, so that joint won't be seen. But it is critical that we get the tail joint absolutely as perfect as we possibly can. So we'll start with, what I've done is I've clamped this, found the spot where it fits the best right here in the waist, and I put a clamp on there, and then to hold the binding so it's pretty tight up against the body in that channel that we routed. And I made a video on how to route that channel for the binding previously. So we're going to mark this where we want to cut it, and then we're going to cut that joint, and we'll size the other one, and then we'll glue them together. So what I'm going to do is, since I know that the midline of the top is also right where I have the joint of the two sides, and you can see how we've got those together and that they are book matched together, the sides. We're going to mark it right there, and we're going to cut the binding right at that point. So I'll make a little mark right where that is with my pencil, and then I'm going to get my square, and we'll mark so that we cut a nice square. We'll cut it right there. Okay, so there's where we're going to cut it. So to cut that piece, I like to just keep it in here so that it keeps its integrity. And so to do that, we need to have some way of holding on to this thing. And so what we're going to do is take a piece of scrap here, and I'm going to put it in my vise like this, and then I can take the body of this thing and I can lean it against there, and take another clamp. This is a nice little trick if you don't have a squeeze for your instrument, and then I can just clamp it gently to that. Make sure you don't get it too tight, and make sure you clamp it right at the side and not inside the body where you're going to create a problem. So it's just lightly held there. So we're going to cut this binding at that point. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to release this tape. This is brown tape from Stumac, which is a great tape for binding, and we'll use it when we glue that on there. It's good tape because it's strong, it doesn't stretch much, and it also holds really well. Now, what I've done is I've put this little piece of plastic, and where I got this was actually from an old kitchen cutting board, one of those plastic cutting boards. And so we're going to cut this, I'm going to move the camera a little bit that way. I'm going to cut this right square at that point. Now here's a trick for cutting. I don't know if the camera shows this, but when I lay the saw here, down here, this is a Japanese dovetail saw, I can see the reflection of the piece I'm cutting in the side of the saw. So if I tilt the saw back and forth like this, that reflection goes this way. The far side is showing an acute angle, and when I come this way, it's an obtuse angle. But when I get the saw so that the reflection lines up perfectly with this piece, that means that the saw blade is square to this piece, to the binding. So I'm going to get my start here. I'm going to cut it very gently to get a start, and then once I've got that started, I'm looking into at the reflection that it lines up, so it lines up clear over, and I can see over the top of the saw blade to this side, and it looks like it's one line, so I know that the saw is square. Okay, so that's the way we're going to cut this. And sometimes I cut them just a slightly long, and we can trim it with a chisel later if we need to. There's my angle. The reason for that plastic is pretty obvious, because if I don't want to get all the way through this little piece and then be cutting into the instrument. So I'm just going to do this until I get all the way through. There it is. Okay, so I've cut this little piece off, and then that piece is going to be right there. See, and it's just exactly on that line. It is just perfect. I'm going to trim the little bit on the bottom because there was a little chip out there. There it is. And now we also want to trim our piece, our little maple here, which is acting as a purfling. So I can actually take the saw in there and just mark it like this, so I know where to cut it. Put my little plastic strip in there, and we just want to cut that too. So we'll just cut that right there. There it is. Okay, so we've cut this end right where we want it. And I'll take another piece of brown tape just to hold that in place temporarily so that we don't end up having any issues. Now we want to do the same thing to the other side. So we come around on this side. This clamp is in the way, so I'm going to just raise this up a little bit. So that's a nice option of having that there. Actually, if I have it there, it's better. And we have the belly on this side, so it's going to be a little angled, but that's all right. It's not going to hurt anything. And put the clamp on here just to hold it so we don't drop it or anything. Make sure our joint is nice and tight. And here's our midpoint. Actually, I can cut both the binding and that little maple piece that acting as a purfling at the same time. So there it is, right there, that's square. That mirror trick is really a nice trick to have with these saws. There it is. Okay, so now that's absolutely right where it needs to be. So put some tape on that to hold it down, because we're going to need to have this held down when we go to the other, to measure the other piece. Okay, so that's good, right where it needs to be. And now we're going to put the other piece on the other side, measure it and cut it. I like to have both of these pieces measured and cut before we start gluing things on, because when we start gluing things on, we don't want to be stopping to do that because of the glue setup time. And on this, I like using fish glue. As you know, I like using all the old traditional glues if I can. Fish glue or hot hide glue, and fish glue is nice for this purpose because fish glue gives you about a half an hour of time to work with it, whereas the hot hide glue only gives you minutes. So we want to use a glue that's going to give us a good amount of time to work with it. So we're going to take the pieces from the other side, the maple and the ebony, and we're going to find that sweet spot where it just sits in there the absolute best that it can. Which is right there. Looks like that's it right there. I kind of rock it back and forth a little bit sometimes just to make sure that it's where it needs to be. Put a clamp on the waist. Just gentle pressure here, nothing really extreme, just to hold it in place. Just very gentle, just to hold it. Now, you can see this is fitting pretty nicely. So we're going to take some brown tape just to make sure. For cutting it, we want it to be pretty much exactly where we want it to be. There's some people who cut these things while they're gluing, cutting them, and with a very sharp chisel. And I find that that works really well if you're using a softer wood. But to cut through 1/8 of an inch of ebony against the grain with a chisel is not something that's easy to do. So we're just going to make sure this is right up against here where we want it to be. Okay, so that's good. Now we're going to do the same thing on this side here that we did before, but we have to you have to realize that if we cut it right at that point, it's actually going to be slightly long because of the angle of it folding in. So it's almost like we take the radius off of that and come up to where it's going to be the right distance. So what I'm going to do is I look at this and I say, okay, this is going to fold in. If I cut it right at that point, it's going to be long. So I'm going to just pull it back just very slightly to that point so that it will just fold in there like a door closing on its hinges. And that's where we're going to cut it, right there. So once again, to cut it, I'm going to put this little board in here. This is a nice little trick here to hold this. And I'm just going to put just a very slight amount of pressure against this, just to hold it so it doesn't fall or anything while I'm working on it. And then we'll cut this piece right where I marked it right there. accident, so we're going to put this in there. Agony is hard. Okay, so that's a little, the maple is a little bit, needs a little bit of trim. And there it is. That is as tight and as good as it's going to get. That is perfect. Okay, very pleased with how that looks. Do the same on this side. I like doing the top first because I get this joint as good as I can, and it's good practice for doing the bindings on the back, because the bindings on the back have to be perfect both on the towards the heel and the tail. They have to be good in both places. So this is good practice, because if you get this one off a little bit, as I mentioned before, it's not going to show. It's going to be hidden by the neck and the fingerboard going over the top of it. Okay, and how does that look? It looks a little bit long because I'm seeing a space here. It's butting up against and it's just slightly long. So to adjust that, I'm just going to take a file, and I don't want to tear up that maple, so I'm going to put it underneath my piece here, and I'm just going to file that down a little bit. Okay, that's it. That is perfect. So now that we've cut the bindings and we have them so that they're both of them fit really well all the way around, and they're pretty much taped tight but not glued yet, we're going to glue those on, and I will do that in the next video. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, suggestions, or comments, leave them in the comments below, and I will address them as quickly as I can. Thank you.